Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Selling Greenville, your favorite real estate podcast here in Greenville, South Carolina. I'm your host, as always, Stan McCune, realtor right here in Greenville, and you can find all of my contact information in the show notes if you need to reach out to me for any of your real estate needs here in the Greenville area or even outside of Greenville. I can hook you up with someone outside of Greenville as well, so let me know. And just a reminder, Piper Insurance Group. They are this show's sponsor. They're my go-to for home, auto, and umbrella insurance. Have helped a ton of my clients as well. They're an independent insurance agency, so they can quote multiple insurance carriers to give you the best possible price and coverage in South Carolina, North Carolina, and Georgia. And they can also help you with investment properties such as fix and flips, new construction, commercial, all of that good stuff. So reach out to them for a free quote today on your home, auto, and umbrella insurance. They are in the show notes as well. If you like this content, please subscribe to the show. If you can like, rate, review, any of those good things, I would greatly, greatly appreciate it from you guys. So please do that. That's about all I ask, okay? Those things there in the opener, okay? That's all I ask of you guys, and hopefully you'll support the show in those ways. Today I want to talk about, I'm still trying to figure out exactly what to call this. I had an episode a while ago called Realtor Code Words, and that was kind of how I was leaning towards entitling this episode. But that one was an episode about like things that realtors say that have double meaning, right? Like this home has tons of potential, is typically an indicator that the home needs a ton of work. That's not what this episode is going to be about. This episode is going to be about code words that people say about realtors and what those words mean. This is going to be a more fun episode, a little bit different than what we typically do, but this is my show and I can do whatever I want. So sometimes, we really get into the weeds on statistics. Sometimes we talk about the big picture of nationwide real estate. And other times I just talk about things that, with regard to real estate that's just in my mind for whatever reason. And this is one of those latter episodes where this is just something that came up in my mind. I was like, you know what, that'll be fun to record. We've had a lot of serious episodes lately, a lot of digging into data, and so we can have a little bit of fun with this one. So, regardless of what I name it, that'll happen. I'll have to really double down on that. Maybe I'll use ChatGPT to help me name this one. But basically, I'm going to go through here and just analyze some phrases that I hear frequently about realtors and give my humorous interpretation of those phrases. Most of them, some of them are going to be, my interpretations are going to be more negative. Some of them are going to be more positive. The negative at the beginning, positive at the end. I do alternate genders on here in terms of who I'm referring to. So about 50% will be male gendered pronouns, 50% will be female, whatever. I'm not making a political statement by doing that. I'm just trying to keep things fair and balanced. Okay. If you don't like that, then don't subscribe or any of those things that I already asked you to do. But we're just going to start right off the top with a phrase that I've heard multiple times, and it's typically used by boomers, actually, by people in their 60s and 70s. And it's the phrase, he's aggressive, or she's aggressive. But in this case, again, I'm going to alternate. He's aggressive. Very interesting one. I don't know if that was like a campaign or some kind of effective marketing that realtors used back in the day. I believe we have a company in a brokerage in Greenville called Aggressive Realty. I don't know anything about them. I've just seen the name. And so it's a word that is frequently associated with realtor. I've heard this multiple times. And my take on when I hear a realtor is aggressive, my assumption based on that is that he uses 80s and 90s style negotiation tactics that are going to turn off a lot of people, but which the person who hired him and said he's aggressive obviously likes. They like those negotiation tactics, probably because they also learned those negotiation tactics in the 80s and 90s as well. But guess what? Real estate keeps moving. It's always changing. It's always morphing. Negotiation tactics are way different now, particularly in real estate, than they were, 40 years ago, for instance. And so people need to realize that just because I like someone's negotiation tactic have they actually been recently trained in negotiation? So I recently did a real estate negotiation expert course and got designated or certified as a real estate negotiation expert. And the tactics are very different now. What are recommended, and this is a course that's a National Association of Realtors course, so it's designed all the way up at the top, right? Designed by professionals. And I was taught by, I mentioned this at the time that I did it, I was taught by someone who had been a salesperson for some major Fortune 500 companies, and has landed some big deals, negotiating in a lot of different ways. And those hyper aggressive 80s 90s style negotiation tactics simply don't work anymore. Well, I shouldn't say they don't work anymore. They can still work, obviously, with certain people, but that's not in the mainstream anymore. Those are really getting phased out big time. And when it's realtors, most of the time, and some people I hear that really like that aggressive technique, they will get confused when they find out that realtors are friendly with each other. They think that we all hate each other. And obviously there is a lot of competition, but they don't like to hear that, that I go and have a friendly conversation with another agent to try to negotiate that way. They want me to just railroad them with negotiation. But Greenville's a small area, and I am on multiple boards, multiple real estate boards, multiple real estate committees. People know who I am. And so I can't just railroad them one time and then, and then never run into them again. These are people that I've had transactions with in the past. I will have transactions with them in the future. And the relational equity that I have with these realtors is actually a huge strength. It's not a weakness. I'm not negotiating with them any less because I enjoy their presence. I am negotiating with them just as hard with them as I would an agent that I have never dealt with before. In fact, if anything, an agent that I know well, I feel more confident negotiating with them than someone that I've never met before because we have a track record. We have a synergy almost. And so people get confused about that. But just understand, if you are working with an agent that you think is going to be great because he's aggressive, probably you might need to do a little bit more digging. I'll say it that way. None of these, I'm giving some broad strokes assumptions in some of these. They're not all going to be accurate. Okay. Not for every situation. But a lot of times they will be. Here's another one I hear. She's hungry. Okay. And people use that to say, she's a real go-getter. That's another way of saying that. But I do hear a lot. She's hungry. What I hear when I hear she's hungry is that she doesn't have any business right now and is able to devote 100% of her time to a single client. Okay. And that's great, right? If that's what you want and that's what you need as a client, you just need someone that doesn't have anything else to do. They can just give you single focus. That's very attractive to a lot of people. If you're at a restaurant, it's great if you have a waiter or a waitress that you're their only table, right? That's incredible. Now in real estate, a waiter or waitress can't control who comes into to the restaurant, and they can't control how many tables are full. But in real estate, we do have a level of control over how much business we have. It just comes down to how much work we're putting into it, how much experience we have, all of that. So if you have an agent that's hungry, and they're really trying to earn some business, good for them. But do consider they don't have business right now, right? They're pushing so hard for your business because they don't have any other business. And it's a good question to ask, why don't they have any business? And so that's the only thing I would caution on that. Another one I hear a lot. I'm trying to give him some business. My interpretation of that phrase, he's not going to be in the business very long. I'm sorry. If realtors in the business need, charity closings, as I call them, from their close friends and family, and their close friends and family aren't just using them because they feel like they are the best possible agent that can represent them, or at least, up there towards the top, that person's just not going to be in business that long, right? Because those charity closings are going to run out. You get a few of them in your first year, and then after that, it's kind of like, can some of my friends and family that I sold homes to last year decide that they want to move? It just doesn't work that way. People, it takes people years after they, settle into a home before they're ready to move again. And so that business dries up. You've got to find business outside of your immediate family friend group. That's why they call it in real estate a sphere of influence. That sphere is much broader than merely your family and friend group. And this is what, I've mentioned a few times on the show. I'm trying to grow out my team, the Morgan Group. We're a small team right now. But one of my passions for that is helping people to take that next step, trying to help people to get past that point of needing to get charity business from close friends and family that feel bad for them or that are trying to support them. You need to take that next step and find those clients that just appreciate how well you do your job. And if you don't do that, you're going to be out of the business very quickly. And if you need help on that, reach out to me. Again, contact info in the show notes. Happy to talk to any agents new or experienced about this. Another one I hear often, she was referred by a friend. Okay. And that's great. Referrals are a huge part of any realtor's business. But when I hear someone say that they're using a realtor strictly because he or she was referred by a friend, my immediate assumption is you really didn't. It doesn't sound like you did any actual due diligence before hiring her, right? You simply heard this from a friend and then decided, sure. I mean, that's simple enough. And maybe it's a very trustworthy friend, someone that, you would take just about any recommendation from. Again, great. But I would warn you that you should still do some due diligence. See what's going on with them. Get a sense of what kind of business they're doing, how involved they are in the local community, all sorts of things, what they're good at, what would they consider to be their area of expertise, all of those good things. Even if you've already made up your mind you're going to use that person, these are good questions to ask, right? You might discover something in that's important. For instance, if it's an agent, you might find that they've basically only worked with buyer clients up to this point, and you're trying to use them to list your home. Well, every agent has to start somewhere. I'm not going to say don't use them to list your home because they've never listed a home before, but just understand that that's a helpful piece of information. You might want to kind of follow up on some things with them a little bit more to make sure that they do a good job. You might even say, hey, since this is your first one, do you mind just having another realtor kind of involved in the mix to assist you and to help you out a little bit, just so that there's another set of eyes on this. Those are things that, in my opinion, is a great idea. Here's another one. He has a large team, and you could probably throw the word impressive in there. He has a large, impressive team, or an impressively large team, right? You're impressed by the fact that this agent is a team leader with a huge team. Now, I just said I co-team lead a small team, and I'd like it to be big or bigger. I don't ever want it to be a huge team, okay? Just to be clear on that. But regardless, he has a large team. When I hear that, the first thing that immediately pops in my head is that you're going to be dealing with his team and not with him. And a lot of people don't realize this, that a lot of team leaders, they only take the cream of the crop, right? They're only taking the luxury listings. They're only taking the high-end buyers. They're taking basically the best business coming their way. And then as, anything that they don't want to deal, those mobile home buyers, those investor buyers that are difficult to work with, basically all the people that I built my business on, the foreclosures, I could keep going. They don't want to take that business, and it's understandable, right? From a business owner standpoint, you do want to follow the 20-80 principle, right? 80% of your income is going to come from 20% of what you do in real estate. Oftentimes 80% of your income comes from 20% of your closings. That's in a lot of industries, and real estate is no exception. But unfortunately, a lot of team leaders pass off a huge portion of their clients to people on their team. And you really, really need to, if you ever are communicating with an agent that has a big team or an agent that's a broker, you need to ask the question, who will I be communicating with the most? Will I be communicating with you? Will I be communicating with someone on your team? Will I be communicating with your admin? And will it be different? Will it be before, before we're looking at houses, I'll be communicating with one person, and then another person will show me houses, and another person will help me on the contract side? These are the sorts of questions you need to ask, because a lot of times team leaders delegate a lot of the process to other parties. And I see this over and over again. With me, if you're listening to this and you're thinking, well, Stan has a team, I don't pass off business to my team members. I don't. Unless I am absolutely maxed out. And in that case, I will let you know. I will tell you, listen, this is the position that I'm in right now, but I've got good news for you. There's a member of my team that has bandwidth right now that will be able to help you. And I'm going to make sure that he or she does a good job. And I will follow him or her throughout the transaction to ensure that everything goes smoothly. That's how I approach it. It's very, very unusual. Pretty much only when I'm traveling that I have to pass off someone to someone else on my team, because I've got, a lot of bandwidth. Not to say that I'm not busy. I'm very busy, but I've got a lot of bandwidth, right? I'm very efficient in terms of how I use my time. I can take on more clients, and it'll be a while before I'm at a point where I'm just like so overwhelmed that I'm having to pass off people to others on my team, just by virtue of that I'm too busy. So that's something to keep in mind. And again, I would never do that without telling the person first that that's what's going to happen. Telling my client first that that's what's going to happen. Another one here. She drives a nice car and seems very successful. Okay. When I hear that, I hear that her top priority is her brand, not her clients, right? And this is an interesting one, right? Because I purchased a vehicle a couple of years ago. I had to replace, I had a Subaru, which sometimes evokes some interesting opinions from people. But I upgraded to a brand new Ford F-150 a couple of years ago. And that was an interesting decision, because I wanted a truck to begin with, but I really had to think about what brand am I portraying? What am I telling people when I roll up to that showing or that first meeting or that listing presentation in a pickup truck? Well, you'll see a lot of realtors in very, very fancy convertible cars, sports cars, all sorts of things. And I'm not saying that they're a bad realtor. Just understand that that's their brand, right? And they're trying to communicate something to you. What they're trying to communicate is, I am very wealthy and very successful. And obviously, if they're very successful, that might be a good realtor to work with. But if they are really focused on material things, then they're not focused on their clients. Like, that's just the reality of the situation. So that's something to keep in mind when you're interviewing a realtor. That is very focused on their own personal brand and how they appear. Another one. This is not an exact number. This is just kind of, I've heard these sorts of things. He sold 250 homes last year. When I hear that, and of course people will say that they're very impressed. They're like, wow, he sold 250 homes this year. Mine will be a breeze. When I hear that, I hear he's either a liar or he's too busy for you, right? There is no agent selling 250 homes that has bandwidth for another one. Like, imagine, 250 homes in 1 year. You're talking about basically closings every single business day of the year, right? That's insane. That would be, if you do some back of the napkin sort of math for the Greenville market, you're talking about that would be an agent that brought in like $2.5 million. That would be absolutely insane. And I'm not saying that there aren't agents that do that, but usually, 99 times out of 100, they drop an obscene number like that. They're lying, is the reality of the situation. Most likely they have a team and their team sold 250 homes. That is the most likely scenario in that instance. But I would, if I ever hear something like that, if I'm in a competitive uh, client situation where I'm being interviewed by a potential client, they're interviewing some others, and they mention, well, this other guy, I interviewed, sold 250 homes last year. How many homes did you sell? Before I even get into how many homes I sold, I need to address the 250 home thing, because that does not sound right at all. And you need to be prepared. Again, that person sounds like they're too busy for you, is the reality of the situation. Figure out how they're going to manage closely 250 clients. We literally just talked about how if you go into a restaurant, you want to be your server's only table, right? But so you'll hear people that say, that they want that. And then you'll hear people that say, oh, no, I want a realtor that is the equivalent of a server that's serving every single table in the restaurant. Well, I don't think you want that either. You want somewhere in the middle, someone that's experienced but not tapped out. Here's another one. She's very well dressed. And again, I'm just alternating genders here. You could certainly, I'm not saying specifically about women, also men. Hear this about men too. Man, he's really sharp. My take on this, my interpretation of this is, honey, she is not going into that attic with you. Okay? She has on that perfect outfit. He has on that perfect outfit. He is, he or she, they're rolling into that home like they're on House Hunters, with that perfect tailored suit. And they're not going to go into the attic, go into the crawl space. Now, I don't usually go into a crawl space, but simply because, there's a whole lot of reasons why I don't typically crawl around in a crawl space. One of those is that it's actually a risk with our spiders that we have down here. And also I'm not an inspector, so I'm not going to do that. But I'm going to do everything I can. If a client wants to look in there, I've had some situations where I have gone through bushes to try to get there. I don't care a whole lot about my clothes, right? I don't wear super fancy clothes. I try to look nice. I try to look professional. But my goal is to be practical for my clients. And to be practical, there are sometimes I come home and I've got dirt all over my shoes. I've got, stuff on my clothes, spider webs on my shirt. I've had that a few times. And so these are the sorts of things that, again, be careful. Presentation's important. Someone that presents himself so well that they don't look like they can do anything without messing up their look, that's a concern for me. How about this one? He's read an impressive number of books, okay? Haven't heard this one as much. I've heard it a little bit. My take on this is he's read more books than clients he's helped, okay? And he's reading so many books because he's got a lot of time to do it. And he's not getting on-the-job experience. He's got a lot of book knowledge, but not a ton of on-the-job experience. That is the most likely scenario. Now, I know people, again, some people are big readers, right? It might surprise some of you to know that I am actually not a big reader. I could get into that, my personality, why that's the case. But one of the main reasons is I'm busy serving my clients, right? And yeah, I can read at night and all of that, but I don't want to read about work, right? And again, usually when you're talking about an impressive number of books for a realtor, it's going to be books about negotiation, books about real estate, books about wealth building, all these different things. And I do read those things, but I don't read an impressive number of them. I don't have time to do that. What I have time to do? I have time to help my clients out. And as I've already mentioned, I do, I've taken a bunch of classes, I've gotten certifications, designations, all of these things. That to me is much more useful and it's tailored for my market, as opposed to just reading, some book by Robert Kiyosaki or someone like that. How about this one? She was willing to list my home for more than anyone else would. Oh, that was a doozy. She was willing to list my home for more than anyone else would. Here's my interpretation of that statement. She either knows something that no one else does, and there's a question of why and where she got that knowledge, or she's just trying to tell you what you want to hear to get the listing, even if it doesn't benefit you. Okay? In my entire career, I have had one time that I was the realtor that in a listing presentation that offered the highest price to list the home, without knowing what any of the other agents that had been interviewed had offered. The potential client, they did become a client eventually. They told me at that time, just up front, they were just like, wow, well, the other people we interviewed, here's what they were thinking in terms of the price. And I was way higher than them. And they were great from the standpoint of they didn't just immediately go, okay, well, we want to use you because obviously you're wanting to list a home for the highest price. Most of the time, that's a bad strategy, right? Most of the time, the agent that is saying the home is worth less, in a lot of instances, is going to be the agent that's correct. It depends on a lot of things. I don't want to use too broad strokes here, but in that case, my client did a great job. They just confronted me on it right on the spot and asked, "How did you come to this number?" And of course, I was prepared, right? I'd done a whole CMA. I'd done a ton of research into it. I was fully prepared to answer that question. I was ready. I was ready to go. And that was why they ended up hiring me. It was because they saw, wow, okay, he's got logic behind this. He's got data behind this. And so that felt great. But I have also lost listings to agents that said that they would list a home for higher than me. And what ends up happening to those homes, always when I look at them, they always sell for less than what I think I could have sold them for. They don't sell for what they were listed for the most part. And, I think it's a common strategy for agents that they will try to list a home. They just want to get a listing, right? So they'll tell the client whatever they want to hear, even if it doesn't even if it doesn't help them, even if it hurts that potential client. And so you've got to be very careful. It's very interesting. One of my classes that I did a listing, a seller representation specialist certification that I got earlier last year. And we had to go through a whole exercise of pricing homes. And there was a lot of, I'm not going to get into all of the details for this, but I learned a very interesting thing. There were agents, it was a collaborative thing. There were like 600 agents in this class. It was a Zoom class. There might have been more than that, to be honest. But the agents would argue with each other over why the home should be worth more, right? If an agent came in and was just like, I think that home's only worth $400,000. Here's what I think. Another agent would be like, no, it's definitely worth $450, and here's why. Blah 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 blah. And that was a lot of agents on this in this class were doing that, and that told me something very interesting. Agents want to assume the best about the homes that they have the opportunity to sell. This was a hypothetical situation, and agents were jockeying with each other to try to convince everyone that the homes that weren't even real, these were hypothetical homes. They were trying to jockey with each other to convince each other that these hypothetical homes were worth more than they were worth. And that told me a whole lot. If we're doing this in a hypothetical virtual environment, imagine how real this is when you're in a real situation with real people, real houses, real money at stake. And so I think that this is a huge, huge concern for a lot of listing agents, that they talk themselves into a home being worth more than it is worth. And that's why we're seeing so many price reductions right now. And it's a major concern. It's something that people need to grapple with. So definitely don't just go with the agent that offers to list the home for the price that you think it's worth, or for more than the price that you think it's worth. Go with the agent that gives the presentation that demonstrates the value of your home. That's what you need. You need something You need something like that. Now pivoting to a few positive ones, or a few that I'm going to spin in a positive direction, right? They're going to start negative, and I'm going to show another side of the coin. He's not as outgoing as I'd like him to be. My interpretation of that when I hear something like that is he's had to work super hard to get to where he is, because it is not easy being an introverted realtor. Okay, I am more on the introverted side of the introversion extroversion spectrum. But I know realtors that are way more introverted than me. It's so hard to make it in this business because it's a people business, right? There's a lot of communication that you have to do. You're constantly having to talk to people, to negotiate with people, and it's exhausting. It really is. And so to be introverted and to be successful in real estate, and I'm assuming that this person is successful, that would be a question, right? If they're not outgoing, but they've been in the business for 5 years and have done well, they have worked their tail off to get there. I can assure you of that. And there's a good chance that they're going to work their tail off to help you out as well. So keep that in mind. Now, that being said, personality compatibility is a very important part of the equation. So if you feel really uncomfortable with them, they're just so introverted that you guys can't communicate, that's a problem, right? You need to be able to have communication with your realtor. You need to, there's always going to be communication barriers, but you need to feel on some level comfortable communicating with them. And so keep that in mind. Keep all of that in mind if you're dealing with a realtor that's a little bit more introverted than you would prefer. How about this one? She is hard to negotiate with, okay? And you might hear this, or you might say this in situations where, you're trying to hire, for instance, a listing agent, and they won't budge on what it costs for them to them to list the home for you. And you guys are going back and forth, and you feel like they're unreasonable because they won't negotiate with you. Well, guess what? Odds are they're going to be great negotiating for you, right? If they're hard negotiating with you, they're probably going to be great negotiating for you, because you're already getting a glimpse behind the curtain on how they work with other people to a certain extent. Now, again, if they're hard to negotiate with because they are using those aggressive 80s and 90s negotiation tactics, I would say that might not be the best fit, right? Because they might have some issues with the other agents. But if they are just standing their ground and they know their value and they can articulate their value and they can push for it and explain why it's worth a certain price, that's exactly what they're going to do when someone comes to them with a lowball offer on your home. That's exactly what they're going to do when someone, when you're making an offer on a home and the agent on the other side makes arguments that your offer is a lowball offer. So keep that in mind. It's a great way to look behind the veil. If you have to negotiate a little bit with your agent, don't take it the wrong way if they're hard to negotiate with, as long as that hardness isn't a turnoff from the standpoint that they're using old school negotiation tactics that people don't like anymore. How about this one? He seems too busy with side gigs and hobbies. Here's what I would say to that. Okay, not interpretation, more of a food for thought. Think about how you'd feel if your boss told you this. I think you have too many side gigs and hobbies. You're distracted. You need to focus. Like, don't go home and have hobbies and side gigs and all of this. You need to be thinking about work all the time. At the end of the day, realtors, I work for C. Dan Joyner Realtors, but I'm not an employee. I'm an independent contractor of C. Dan Joyner. And so I don't have a boss, a direct boss. My clients are my boss. And so that is equivalent, right? If your boss were to tell you that you have too many side gigs and hobbies, for you to tell me, or for you to tell another agent, or to even think it, that they have too many side gigs or hobbies, you are stepping into that boss role in that instance. And you need to think about, how would I feel if someone said something like this to me? Additionally, I've got news for you. Every realtor has side gigs and hobbies, right? Some realtors are more forward with what those things are. I know realtors that own car detailing companies. I know realtors that own roofing companies. I know realtors that own general construction companies. And I know realtors that own cookie companies. I know realtors that have all sorts of side gigs. And there are some instances where the real estate is more the side gig, right? I have owned a frozen yogurt shop during the time that I've been a realtor. Not the entire time. I don't own it anymore. But earlier in my business, I did not enjoy owning that sort of business. Not my cup of tea. But these things are very, very common, right? Don't immediately assume that a realtor, just because they are very front with their side gigs and hobbies, don't automatically jump to the conclusion that they're distracted, that they're too busy, that real estate isn't their primary thing. You need to dig more into, if you have those concerns, dig more into what that realtor is doing, what their process is like, how much time are they spending with the side gigs and hobbies? Do they have processes in place that, the side gigs in particular are not super time consuming? Are the hobbies, is there a reason to think that the hobbies are getting in the way? Those are questions you need to ask. All right, 3 more, and then we'll be done here. This is taking longer than I thought it would, but hopefully you're having some fun. And hopefully it's helpful as well. Here's one that's a pet peeve of mine. She helped me buy my house 20 years ago, but I haven't heard from her in a while, with the implication that I'm going to use a different agent, right? Because I just haven't heard from this agent in a couple of decades. Let me ask you this. How many people that you were communicating with 20 years ago are you still communicating with today? If you like that agent 20 years ago, you'll probably still like her now. Like, that's the reality of the situation. I never tell someone to leave their agent unless their agent did a bad job for them. And so if they did a good job for you 20 years ago, there's a good chance they'll do a good job for you today. Now, you need to look into, have they kept up with things, right? Are they still, on the front lines? Are they still working full time? Are they still keeping up with current events in the business and all of that? Ongoing training, continuing ed, all of those sorts of things. Obviously, a lot can happen in 20 years. But don't just leave a realtor just because you haven't, your last home purchase or transaction was 20 years ago and you haven't heard from them in a while. You haven't heard from a lot of people that you communicated with 20 years ago, most likely. 20 years ago, I was in college. You know how many of my college friends I'm communicating with right now? It's a pretty low number. So that's something to keep in mind. Don't let long periods of time, still go back to that realtor, right? At least give them a shot. Even if you met 200 realtors during that period of time, go back to that one. If you had a good experience with her, go back and re-interview her and reacclimate yourself with what she's doing before deciding that you want to completely reinvent the wheel with another realtor. How about this one? I'd feel more comfortable with someone my own age. Okay. I get this, right? Everyone wants a realtor that they can have a friendly relationship with, but you don't need to be best friends with your realtor, right? What I would say is, rather than focusing on the age and all of that, focus on experience and how they've continued to evolve their business over the years. Now, if the age, again, the age factor can come into play if you just feel like they don't relate to you, right? And again, I keep coming back to the 80s and 90s style negotiation tactics. If they are showing indicators like that they've not kept up with, current trends when it comes to negotiating, and that they've not kept up with a variety of things. I see some very good agents that aren't dressed very well, right? They're wearing that suit from 30 years ago. But you know what? It doesn't matter, right? Not on the front end. Now it could be indicative. Maybe they haven't replaced their suit in 30 years because they don't have any money because they're bad at real estate. Very possible. But don't immediately jump to that conclusion. You need to do a little bit more digging, as I keep saying in all of these. And be willing to work with a realtor that's not the same age as you. I've worked with a lot of clients that are substantially older, and some that are half my age I've worked with before. And I've worked with people double my age. And I feel like I I can work equally well with all of them. Sometimes the age difference can be challenging, right? But don't immediately dismiss someone because of that. You might be dismissing the best possible realtor out of the pool that you're looking at, and they don't need to be your friend. They just need to help you sell or buy a house, right? That is what they're trying to do, and they might be able to do that without you ever really feeling like you click with them on that friend level. Last but not least, definitely not least, I don't like her political views. I've heard this a variety of times. Not actually, believe it or not, not specifically for me. I do have some strong political views. I'm sure there are some people that haven't used me because of that. But anytime, nobody's ever told me that. The only times I've ever heard people tell me something about my political views, it's either neutral or it's positive. I don't get a whole lot of I don't get people that are just like I would never work with you because of your stance on politics. But I have heard this for other realtors. I'm not saying that to pat myself on the back. I just want to make sure that you guys understand that I'm not using this as an example where I'm really talking about myself, but in the guise of talking about another agent. No. I am simply using this as an example that I've heard from others. And I'll just say this, all right, about political views, because there are all sorts of, this can go in all sorts of different directions. Here's what I would say. First off, all realtors are capitalists, right? Even if you work with a really quote unquote leftist realtor, and even one that claims that they are a socialist, for instance, they're not. They're a capitalist. You can't be a realtor and be a socialist. It is impossible. This is probably the most capitalistic job that you can have, right? It's literally the amount of time you put into it directly correlates to whether you make money or not. Like, it is 1-to-1. There's a reason why real estate has more women than men, right? It's because there's not all of the gatekeeping that there is in these other industries that, quite frankly, there is probably misogyny happening. And that cause women to be able to not be able to get some of the jobs that they could. There's a lot of other reasons as well. Of course, real estate has a degree of flexibility. A higher percentage of women than men are primary to raising their children, maybe homeschooling, those sorts of things. So real estate, there's more than one reason for why women make up roughly 65% of realtors. But before I go off the deep end here and start really talking about a whole lot of things that I shouldn't be talking about here, I'm just going to say that on the surface level, the things that are important to you as a home buyer or seller, whatever political views that realtor has, almost certainly it's not going to impact their ability to help you. Unless, okay, this is the one thing that I think is a clear exception. There's probably some other exceptions, but this is the one that I think of. If the person is just always talking about politics and it's just really nauseating, right? You just can't, it just gets on your nerves. It's distracting. You just don't want to hear it anymore. I totally get that. Okay. Don't work with them. And I try not to be that way. If you follow me on Facebook, I do post some political stuff on there. If you're my client, you generally won't hear me talk about politics a whole lot. And if you do, I'm going to be extremely diplomatic because I don't ask my clients what their political views are. That could be a fair housing violation. So I always assume that my client could be super liberal or super conservative. And so if I talk about politics, I'm going to be very careful in how I do that. And generally speaking, I'm not going to, right? What I put out there on Facebook, I'm just shouting into the void, as it were. But when I'm dealing with real people in real life, I'm not going to get too in the weeds on that unless that's a conversation I feel like that they want to have. So keep that in mind. I wouldn't get too crazy. If you know that someone is super this or super that when it comes to politics, don't immediately dismiss them on the basis of that. See if you're drawing that conclusion from their online presence, go have coffee with them and see, if politics comes up or maybe even ask them a political question to see how they respond to that. Don't just automatically assume that they're too political to be able to help you, or that their politics doesn't work well enough with your politics for them to be able to help you. That's all I have for you guys today. Thank you so much for listening. My contact info and Piper Insurance Group's contact info is in the show notes. Please like, rate, review, subscribe, all those good things. And we will talk again next time.